Hi, welcome to Module 2A for Internationalization of Higher Education. This module is being facilitated by Ebony Kern and Mark Thomas, that's me. The guiding theme for Module 2A is about meeting international students' needs so they can have a successful experience. Supplemental to this main theme is how an institution presents itself from a recruitment perspective and how current and student satisfaction influences future student interest and factors into their geographic and institutional choices. Our first reading was by Garrett and Marola in the Proctor and Rumbley book, and their chapter is called New Modes of Research, Understanding and Improving the International Student Experience Using Data. And it discusses how to better use data to understand the goals and motivations of students around the world, trying to grasp an understanding of, quote, what constitutes a strong international student experience, end quote, and highlighting the issue that data are not often shared. The article then focuses on the International Student Barometer Survey, ISB, which is one tool that has been designed to better track and compare decision-making, expectations, perceptions, and intentions of international students from pre-enrollment to their plans for post-graduation. It also allows for institutions to benchmark against a peer group, uses results to identify where the institution is doing well and where improvement is needed, and measures satisfaction on a 4-point scale. The ISB survey promises to allow for better recruitment strategies, support students, and engage alumni. The survey is said to be important because it examines the connection between students' satisfaction and the likelihood they recommend the institution to other prospective students. It includes 1,400 institutions that have been involved in the survey since 2005 and includes over 2.5 million students who have participated. A few examples of the types of survey results are, if you find yourself in any of these specific situations, would be useful to know. For international students overall, nationality and year of study are predictors of satisfaction. There's a negative correlation between a higher international student ratio and satisfaction with lecture quality and time with faculty outside the class. There's a negative correlation between the ratio of international undergraduates from China and integration among international students. There is higher satisfaction among students from Europe than students from most parts of Asia and the Middle East. And there are statistically significant differences in satisfaction between Chinese and Indian and South Korean and Indian students. However, there's no difference in terms of results of the survey between Chinese and South Korean students. So then, how are these types of outcomes used by institutions who participate or subscribe to the survey and use the results? Here's a few examples of how some institutions have used the survey. So the University of Cincinnati, they learned that it took 3 weeks longer than average compared to their peers to make admissions decisions. And so to address this issue, the university created an international admissions office and ended up shortening the decision time frame. The University of Aberdeen at Scotland used data to change their organizational structure to ensure coordination of international student support services, and also created what they called an info hub to increase communication and collaboration by becoming a, quote, one-stop shop for all international student inquiries. The University of Adelaide in Australia identified a lack of integration between domestic and international students, and that led to the creation of a actual physical facility, a social space for all students to gather. And then finally, the University of Oxford, final example. University of Oxford used feedback about satisfaction with grading to share best practices and make changes. And each of those institutions was able to make operational adjustments to meet their international students' needs and increasing student satisfaction. There are, of course, limitations to using the ISB survey data. For example, ISB participants are a self-selecting group who in many cases are already hyper-focused on international students, and therefore they may already be doing a better job in trying to satisfy them, so that may influence and weigh into the self-selection aspect. In using ISB data, you have to be conscious of the fact that it only looks at satisfaction, meaning You need other data to provide a more holistic international student experience than just satisfaction. And then a third limitation given is that social media data might actually be better data than survey data, in that students answering a survey may give biased answers specifically because they know they're participating in a survey, as opposed to in their social media lives or social media activity, they are more likely to be exhibiting their, quote, real behaviors, the way they just sort of act and interact naturally. And then, of course, the obvious major issue with that, though, with that approach is privacy. The next reading was the Hanassa and Tidwell article from the Journal of Studies in International Education. Their article is titled International Students in Higher Education, Identification of Needs and Implications for Policy and Practice. And it focused on assessing the needs of international students and examining their overall experiences. It looked at the similarities and differences with regards to geographic location, gender, degree objective, and field of study. Chapman identified three forces that will have an important impact on campuses. First, as we know, there has been and will continue to be an increase in enrollment of diverse, quote, non-traditional students. Number two, there continues to be a strong, robust migration of students worldwide. And then because of number one and number two, institutions need programs that address promotion, management, and guidance of international students. The article discusses a study that looked at the University of California, Los Angeles, UCLA, in 2000, and included 640 of their 2,093 international students. 369 of them were male, 271 were female, 75% single, 42% in science-related fields. A little more than half were doctoral students, and about the rest was an equal balance, about a quarter each of master's and undergraduate students. The average GPA, the mean GPA, was 3.6, and that 3.6 GPA was the same as all UCLA international students, so the balance of that 2,093. So it felt like it was a representative GPA of the international student population. In terms of how the survey was structured, it looked at three components. It looked at needs and concerns, personal changes, and demographic information. I'll take those one at a time. For needs and concerns, they were interested in looking at areas of adjustment, such as cultural, communication, academic and study skills, career, psychological, personal, knowledge of immigration and visa requirements, ethnic and racial discrimination, and drug, alcohol, and cigarette use. The second component of the survey, personal changes, looked at how the students self-assessed how much they've changed since they moved to Los Angeles and the United States. Students were asked to rate themselves with their comfort level being around Americans and what their familiarity was with American customs, as well as a general awareness of other cultural differences. They rated themselves on a 5-point scale, ranging from very little change to very much changed. The third and final component of the survey focused on demographic information, gathering characteristics such as their gender, age, nationality, what their major was at the time, their grade point average, the length of time they had been in the United States and in Los Angeles, what their degree objective was, and what their marital status was. And here we have some of the major findings of that study. The primary overarching concern for international students is the need for knowledge about immigration regulations and visa requirements, and this is because before anything else can happen, they need to be able to resolve those issues first. International students have low scores for personal and psychological needs. That may be because it's more difficult for international students to reveal those needs, and they may prefer rather to deal with it in their culture and not through student services offered by the institution. Now, the next three findings may not be much of a surprise given how much race matters in the United States, and with the history of whites in the United States discriminating against almost all other ethnic groups. So only African international students reported substantial difficulty related to stereotyping and discrimination. African, Asian, and Southeast Asian students reported the greatest adjustment difficulties in general, and students from Canada and Western Europe were the most socially involved with U.S. nationals and had the fewest number of adjustment problems. Continuing with the major findings of the study, for those who are from the Far East, they reported being least involved socially and reported the greatest number of adjustment difficulties. That's sort of in line with the first piece about Asia and Southeast Asian students. Females identified having greater campus service needs than males and had greater difficulty adjusting to their situation than males. Undergraduates identified having a higher need for services than graduate students. Science students identified as having the greatest needs, and perhaps that has something to do with the rigor of those programs, although it would also be interesting to see the intersectionality of science students and other demographics, such as geographic origins, age, and gender. That would be interesting. And then finally, one finding that might seem obvious but is important to grasp is that students with higher GPAs have fewer needs overall. They're doing well, and they're feeling satisfied and have relatively well-established adjustments. The article then made several recommendations based upon those findings, including that specific programs should be designed to address international students with low GPAs. It also recommended that in workshops and orientation sessions focusing on cultural adjustments for new international students and continuing international students, that the focus should be on career and vocational decisions and on immigration rules and regulations. And then also something that didn't seem to directly come out of the study but was mentioned, and we agree it's important, is that support for cultural diversity and valuing differences has to come from top administration. We always hear about the tone at the top being important. The final reading was from Mazerol and Suter from the International Journal of Educational Management. Their article is entitled Push-Pull Factors Influencing International Student Destination Choice, and it looked at 4 studies from Taiwan, India, China, and Australia to examine the factors motivating international student choice, both from the perspective of things that would make them go away from where they come from, as well as what motivates their country and ultimately their institution choice. Many factors influence the demand for international education, but the following were identified prominently: an historic lack of access to education in many Asian and African countries, an historic or colonial links between host countries, including common languages that may make it influential, availability of science and or technology-based programs, and the geographic proximity of the home and host countries, how close or far apart they are. In terms of the push factors, Mazerol and Suter noted that push factors operate from within the student's source country, their home country, and those initiate a student's decision to undertake international study. That's what makes them decide they want to leave and study internationally. Some of the push factors cited were low level of economic wealth in the host country, the degree of involvement of the home country in the world economy, the priority placed on education by the government of the home country, and the availability of educational opportunities in the home country. Pull factors, in terms of operating within a host country and have to do with how that country is attractive to international students relative to other countries, include the difference in size between the home and host countries. That matters. Whether or not and to what extent there are economic links between the home and host countries, whether or not the host country has national political interests in the home country that are being met by foreign assistance or other cultural links, and the ability for the host country to offer scholarships or other assistance for international students. Mazerol and Suter further identified 6 country-specific pull factors for selecting a country. It looked at the knowledge and awareness, which is influenced by the overall availability of information, reputation for quality, and the recognition of the host country's qualifications in the home country. And then they looked at personal recommendations from parents, relatives, friends, or others. Those are additional pull factors for selecting a country. And then cost issues, such as fees, living expenses, travel and social costs, such as crime, safety, and racial discrimination. Part of this may also be the availability of scholarships and other forms of assistance, helping with the costs. The environment, things like the physical climate, temperatures, urban versus rural environments, large versus small schools, and other general lifestyle factors. And then finally, social links. So, whether or not family or friends live in the host country, or family or friends have studied or visited there previously or recently. So, those are the three articles. There's an additional set of materials that I believe Ebony is posting in the discussion, more around the video and some additional comments around some of the topics covered in the PowerPoint here. So, we encourage you to review this PowerPoint. Obviously, you've done that already if you're hearing this, as well as that other set of materials and document that Ebony uploaded. And then we had a series of questions that we wanted to pose for you to consider, and hopefully they can start some of the discussion. The first question, of course, you can read them here, but we'll go through them to be thorough. For your case study institution, what have you learned so far that seems to be designed to address some of the needs identification in this model? Second, do you believe institutions should prioritize hosting international students to aid domestic students who do not travel abroad? Why or why not? This is a question of who is it for? The third question we'd like you to think about is, are mutual exchange agreements needed in the United States to offset the decline in student enrollments for outbound students? How do you think they would affect our current educational landscape? And then finally, what collaborative initiatives does your school utilize to encourage student mobility of prospective international students? In other words, transfer credits, dual degrees, residency options. Does your home school that you work at or you are a student at utilize to any of those? Thanks so much for listening. We really look forward to the discussion, and we'll see you on the discussion board. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.